The suns of Kashar burned like twin furnaces above the endless red desert. The air shimmered, dry and cruel, and every grain of sand seemed alive with heat and death. A group of alien warriors stood in a wide circle, their armor black with dust, their faces hidden behind bone masks. At the center of the circle knelt a single human, dirty, sunburned and half-conscious. His name was Corporal Reed, the last survivor of Outpost Erebus. Chief Vardrak, the leader of the alien raiders, stood tall before him, his massive spear resting across his shoulder. He was a creature of scale and muscle, his eyes glowing faint gold beneath the shadow of his helm. When he spoke, his voice carried like thunder across the dunes. "Pray the desert eats you first, human," he mocked, laughter spreading through the alien crowd. "The sands are merciful. The heat kills fast, but I am not so kind." Reed did not look up. His lips were cracked, his skin peeling, and the chain that bound his wrists rattled faintly in the wind. He looked more like a corpse than a soldier. But behind those sunburned eyelids, something cold and alive waited, a patience no alien could understand. The chief walked around him slowly, dragging the butt of his spear through the sand. "Your people ran from the sky like insects," he continued. "Your machines burned, your blood boiled, and now only you remain." He leaned close to the human's ear, his breath hot and heavy. "Pray, little creature, for even the worms below would spit you out." The other aliens laughed again, a deep growl that rolled like thunder. But then, Reed lifted his head. It was a small movement, stiff and painful, yet it silenced the crowd. His eyes were pale blue, rimmed with red from exhaustion, but there was something in them, a strange calm that cut through fear. And then he spoke, voice dry and slow. "I don't pray," he said, pausing as the wind hissed between them. "I eat last." For a long second, no one moved, then came uneasy laughter. Thin and nervous, the chief tilted his head, confused whether to mock or fear. Reed's tone wasn't angry. It wasn't proud. It was simple, matter-of-fact, like he was talking about dinner, and that calmness under the twin suns of Kashar felt wrong. Unnatural. Even the desert wind went quiet, as if listening. The chief snarled and struck the human across the face with the shaft of his spear. Reed fell back into the sand but didn't cry out. Blood ran from his lip, and still his eyes never left the horizon. "Take him," Vardrak barked. "Let him walk the dunes until the sun burns his soul away." The guards hauled Reed to his feet and dragged him toward the desert edge. But even as they pulled him, he looked back once more. And the chief saw it. Something in his stare that didn't belong to prey. It was the look of someone who had seen worse than death. The aliens threw him out beyond the dune line, leaving him with nothing, no water, no weapon, no hope. When their ships rose into the air, dust storms followed, coating the world in orange haze. Reed stood there, weak and alone, watching them vanish into the sky. He wiped blood from his mouth and whispered again, almost to himself, "I eat last." The desert stretched before him like an ocean made of knives. Every step sank into burning dust. Every breath tasted of ash far behind him. The alien camp disappeared, swallowed by heat. He walked until the suns began to fall, and the shadows grew long across the dunes, somewhere far off. Something moved beneath the sand, silent, circling, ancient. He felt it under his boots, a vibration that came and went like the desert itself was breathing. Reed stopped and looked toward the fading light. He had no food, no water, and no clear direction. But he wasn't lost. He was thinking, planning, waiting. The desert wasn't his grave. It was his battlefield and the men who mocked him. They just didn't know it yet. As the last rays of sunlight touched the red dunes, a cold wind rose from the north. It carried with it strange whispers, the kind that made even strong warriors look over their shoulders. Somewhere in the darkness, a growl echoed across the sand, low and hungry. Reed crouched down, pressing his hand into the ground, feeling the tremor again. Whatever lived under there wasn't a myth. He smiled faintly, the first true smile in days. "Guess I'm not eating alone," he murmured. Above him, the two suns disappeared, leaving only stars that looked sharp as blades. And in that quiet night, the last human on Kashar began to move. Slowly, carefully, step by step, toward the shadows where the desert beasts slept. The war was not over, not yet, because the man who eats last always finishes the fight. The red horizon stretched endlessly before him. Burning with heat and silence, Corporal Reed walked alone. His boots cracked and half melted from the desert's cruelty. Every breath scraped his throat like broken glass. Every gust of wind carried sand sharp enough to cut skin. Yet somehow he kept moving one step after another, like a machine that refused to die. He had been walking since dawn, with nothing but the hum of the wind for company. Behind him lay the ashes of Outpost Erebus, once a proud human base, now nothing but twisted steel and bone. Reed could still see flashes in his mind. The day the alien bombardment came, the sky turning red with plasma fire. His squad scattered and burned before they even screamed. He had buried what was left of them beneath the dunes, marking each grave with a piece of their armor. Then he kept walking. Because that's what soldiers did when there was no one left to follow. The desert had no mercy. It cooked him during the day and froze him at night. But it also hid things, strange things, half buried by time and war. Once, as he stumbled over a dune, Reed spotted something shining in the sand. He dropped to his knees and brushed it off. It was a human dog tag. Scorched but readable, he turned it over and saw a name. Lalatio Harker. He remembered the man, his commanding officer, the one who gave him orders to protect the data core at all costs. Reed clenched the tag in his fist, the memory cutting deeper than the heat. Harker had said, "If I fall, don't pray. Just finish the job." And Reed wasn't the kind of man who broke promises. By noon, his vision blurred. The twin suns turned into white circles in the sky, and his head spun. He stumbled into the shadow of a rusted wreck, a half-buried transport from the early days of the invasion. Inside, the air was cooler, thick with the smell of burned fuel and decay. Broken helmets, torn flags, and shattered glass littered the floor. He moved through the wreck carefully, hand on the wall for balance, until a flicker caught his eye, a small, red light still blinking weakly beneath the dust. He crouched, wiping away grime. It was a recorder unit, military grade. Still running on emergency power, he pressed the button, and a distorted voice came through the static. "This is Commander Harker. Outpost Erebus fallen. All units retreat east of Ridge 14. Safeguard data core. Do not let it fall. Repeat, do not..." The message cut out. Swallowed by silence, Reed sat there staring at the small device. His body ached, his mind screamed to rest. But the words repeated in his head like a drumbeat. Do not let it fall somewhere out here under miles of sand. Was that data core? Something the aliens wanted badly enough to kill for. And as long as it wasn't destroyed. His mission wasn't over. He looked up toward the horizon, where faint smoke trails marked the direction of the alien camp. He didn't have weapons or armor, but he had something the aliens never understood. Stubbornness. The kind that didn't fade with fear or pain when night came. He built a small fire using scrap and dry resin from a cracked ration pack. The stars above Kashar were cold and endless. Thousands of tiny eyes staring down at him. He ate the last of his protein bar, slow and quiet, listening to the desert breathe. Somewhere far away something howled, a long, deep sound that echoed between the dunes. It wasn't an alien call, not one he recognized. He looked toward the sound, frowning. The ground beneath him trembled again, light but steady, as if something large was moving under the surface. Reed picked up a jagged metal rod from the wreck and pressed it into the sand, feeling the vibration through it. It came and went, pulsing like a heartbeat. He remembered what the aliens used to say. The sand eaters were just myths, giant desert beasts that swallowed entire armies. But Reed didn't believe in myths, only in survival, he whispered to the empty desert. If they're real, maybe they'll eat the ones who mocked me first. When the fire died out, the cold came crawling back. He wrapped a torn cloak around his shoulders and leaned against the wreck. Sleep didn't come easily. He could still hear the alien chief's words. Pray the desert eats you first, and echoing in his mind. And again his cracked lips curled into that same tired smile. I don't pray, he murmured. He closed his eyes, listening to the sand move outside, slow and alive. I eat last. As he drifted into uneasy rest, the dunes around the wreck shifted. Something massive moved beneath the surface, circling, waiting in the faint starlight. A ripple crossed the sand like a shadow with a mind of its own. Reed didn't see it, but the desert had begun to stir. And when morning came, nothing in the wastes would stay quiet for long. The dawn on Kashar came like fire, 2 suns rising from the red horizon, spilling gold light over endless dunes that looked like a sleeping ocean. Corporal Reed stood at the edge of a shallow crater, his face streaked with dust and sweat. staring at what he had uncovered through the night. Half buried in the sand was a comms relay, old, human-made, rusted by years of wind and war. He had found it by accident, following faint metal pings on his battered scanner. If it still worked even a little, it might tell him where the data core was buried. He knelt beside it, brushing sand off the cracked metal surface. The device hissed when he tried to power it on, sparks jumping like dying fireflies. Then, through the static, came a faint sound, a voice distant and broken. "Unit, respond. Erebus down. Survivors. Coordinates." The message repeated, looping endlessly. But as he listened, Reed realized something strange. There were other sounds mixed in. Whispers soft and wet, like voices speaking through the sand itself. He froze. At first he thought it was the wind, but then one whisper became clear enough to understand. It wasn't human and it wasn't mechanical. It sounded alive, ancient, hungry. The ground beneath him pulsed once. A deep thump like a heartbeat, and the sand rippled outward. Reed jumped back, grabbing his metal rod, his instincts screaming. Something was under there, something awake. The wind picked up. Whirling sand around him, from the distance came a low, echoing cry, half animal, half thunder. It rolled across the dunes, and Reed felt it in his chest. He'd heard stories from prisoners before. The aliens talked about sand eaters, creatures that swallowed entire war machines. They laughed when they said it, calling them myths. But Reed was standing on proof that myths could breathe. He stepped away from the crater, slow and careful. Every few seconds, the sand shifted with tiny tremors, like something massive was circling below. His mind raced. If he could lure whatever it was toward the alien camp, it might give him the distraction he needed to find the data core. It was dangerous, maybe suicidal, but Reed wasn't the kind of man who waited for luck. He made his own. He scanned the wreckage again, searching for anything he could use. The broken comms relay still had power cells, weak but alive. He tore them free and began wiring them together using his knife and stripped copper from his armor. Soon he had a crude energy pulse emitter, unstable, but strong enough to make heat and vibration. Exactly the kind of bait that could wake monsters. He planted it on the sand and backed away. Pressing the trigger, the device began to glow red. Humming with rising energy, the whispering stopped, replaced by silence so thick it pressed on his ears. Then the ground exploded. Sand shot upward in a violent burst as something vast and pale rose from below, a creature of bone and scale, its mouth a spiral of jagged teeth. Reed stumbled back, shielding his face as the beast roared. It wasn't just one either. Shadows moved behind it, slithering beneath the dunes like ships beneath waves. He stared, awestruck, realizing what the desert truly was. Not dead, not empty, alive and starving. The alien chief had said the desert eats everything. He had no idea how right he was. Reed watched as the largest creature slid back beneath the sand. Heading west, toward the alien hunting patrols, he could almost hear their laughter in his memory. The way they mocked his death. Now the desert would mock them back. He picked up the comms unit again and tuned it to the alien frequency. Static hissed, then a voice came through. An alien scout laughing. "Human, still breathing? The chief says your bones will feed the worms." Reed pressed the talk key, voice calm. "Check your ground," he said quietly. There was confusion on the other end. "What did you—" The transmission cut off with a scream, then nothing but static. Reed stared at the comms device as sand in the distance erupted in a tall, twisting column. When it settled, silence returned. He smiled faintly, whispering to himself, "I told you I eat last." He turned back toward the crater, picking up the last working part of the relay. It displayed a faint coordinate reading, something deep beneath the western dunes. That had to be where the data core was buried. But now he knew he wasn't the only one moving through this desert. Something ancient had woken up, and it didn't care who it devoured first as the suns began to sink again. Reed moved quietly through the wasteland behind him. The dunes trembled like a heartbeat far away. Alien radios screamed with reports of soldiers vanishing, of the sand swallowing entire patrols, and through it all, one broken human signal whispered across the static, "I eat last." By the third sunrise, the dunes of Kashar were no longer silent. The alien scouts whispered of shadows beneath the sand, of soldiers dragged under without a trace. But Chief Vardrak, proud and furious, refused to believe a lone human could be behind it. He stood upon a dune ridge, his black armor gleaming under the twin suns, watching as another patrol failed to return. The ground below him seemed to shift and breathe. Like something vast was sleeping beneath his feet. He spat into the dust and growled. Find the human. His warriors spread across the dunes in formation, engines howling, banners snapping in the wind. They rode insect-like skimmers armed with plasma spears and nets that glowed with heat. To them this was a simple hunt, an insult to their honor that needed to be burned away. But as they sped deeper into the wastes, the wind died. No sound of birds, no movement in the air, only a faint humming beneath the sand. It grew louder the farther they went, like a drumbeat coming from the planet's heart. Meanwhile, miles away, Reed crouched behind a half-buried crawler engine, watching through cracked binoculars. He counted 20 riders, all moving in tight formation, unaware of the traps he'd laid beneath the dunes. Every trap was simple, modified power cells rigged to explode when crushed. And when the aliens' mounts skittered across them, the desert itself would rise, he whispered to himself, steady and calm. Let's see who the desert eats first. The first explosion was small. A puff of sand, a flash of blue light. But the ground reacted like it had been struck by lightning. The dunes convulsed, sand falling away in spirals as something massive surged upward. A sand-eater erupted from below, its mouth a spinning ring of teeth, glowing faintly with heat from the planet's core. 2 riders vanished instantly, their screams lost in the roar of shifting earth. The rest turned in panic, shouting in their own tongue, trying to fire into the sand, but the beasts were faster. From the ridge, Vardrak watched in disbelief, his pride turning into cold rage. He slammed his spear into the ground, bellowing orders, "Form ranks! It's the human's trick, don't let the sand frighten you." But his soldiers couldn't hear him over the chaos. The desert swallowed another patrol whole, their skimmers flipping like toys. And in the storm of dust and screams, a new sound cut through, a voice. Human, calm and steady. "Still think I pray, Chief?" Vardrak froze, looking around. The voice came from everywhere, echoing through their comms. "Reed," he hissed. "Show yourself, coward." But there was only static then through the haze. He saw movement. One human figure standing tall on a dune. Rifle aimed but steady. The chief raised his weapon, but before he could fire, the ground between them collapsed again. A second beast burst forth, so close the heat from its body singed his armor. The alien warlord staggered back as the creature snapped at his skimmer. Swallowing half of it whole, he leapt aside. Rolling into the sand around him, his soldiers screamed and vanished one after another. For the first time in his life, the chief felt fear, not of death, but of something older than his gods. He looked toward the dunes where Reed had been. But the human was gone. Only footprints leading deeper into the storm. Vardrak stumbled to his feet, panting. He activated his comms and shouted to his ship above, "Pull back! Regroup! The human controls the beasts!" But the reply came too late. Their ship's signal flickered, then went silent. When he looked up, he saw the sand ripple far into the distance, waves moving toward the horizon. The human wasn't just surviving. He was using the desert as his weapon. Far away, Reed knelt in the shadow of a dune, watching the chief retreat through the lens of a cracked scope. His plan had worked better than expected. He had learned the beasts responded to vibration, heat, and sound, 3 things the alien machines made in abundance. He didn't need an army. He had the planet itself. The desert didn't take sides. It just fed, and today it fed well. He pressed a button on his wrist device. Opening the alien frequency again, static hissed. And then the human voice broke through. "Low and steady, Vardrak," he said. "You mocked a dying man." He paused, letting the silence stretch until it hurt. "You should have prayed." Then he switched off the comm and looked toward the horizon. Smoke rose where the alien skimmers had vanished. Their engines still burning under the dunes. Reed adjusted his pack and began walking west, following the faint signal of the data core buried somewhere beyond. Behind him, the wind carried distant screams that faded into the endless hum of the desert. The chief's hunt had failed, but Reed's war had only begun under the twin suns. One man walked through a sea of death, and the desert itself seemed to whisper his words again. "I eat last." The night fell heavy over Kashar. 2 moons rose pale and cracked in the black sky, throwing silver light over dunes that still trembled from the chaos of the day. Reed moved through the darkness like a shadow himself, silent and slow, every sense sharpened by survival. The air tasted of burnt metal and ozone, the remains of alien plasma weapons now buried beneath the sand. He could still see faint fires far away where the chief's hunt had ended, and the smell of scorched armor drifted on the wind, but Reed didn't stop to watch. His tracker, an old wrist device patched together with scavenged alien tech, was blinking now. Weak but constant, pointing toward something deeper in the western dunes. He followed it until the sand grew darker, mixed with fragments of melted glass and twisted metal. There, buried halfway under a dune the size of a mountain, he saw it, an outline too straight to be natural. A structure of steel ribs and plates half swallowed by centuries of dust. He slid down the slope, boots sinking deep. As he brushed away the sand, he saw old human markings. United Terran Engineering Division. A memory flashed in his head from years ago before the war. There had been stories about the mobile crawlers, massive, self-contained fortresses built to survive planetary collapse. Most were destroyed when Kashar fell, but maybe this one had been left behind, buried by storms, forgotten. He pressed his palm against the cold metal. It vibrated, faint but alive. He found a narrow hatch under a collapsed ramp and forced it open with a crowbar made from alien scrap. The stale air that poured out smelled like old oil and dust. Inside was darkness, but it was cooler, quiet. He stepped inside, his flashlight cutting through the black to reveal a corridor lined with machines. Panels flickered as if waking from sleep. He followed the main passage to a control room, and there he saw it, a large core chamber pulsing dim red. The light was faint, almost gone, but still beating like a dying heart. He knelt before it and wiped away grime from the console. The symbols flickered, identity recognized. Access restored. A mechanical voice, soft and broken by static, filled the air. Command protocol, active. Commander Reed detected. Reed froze. That voice. It was human technology, but old. He swallowed hard, whispering, "You're still alive?" "Core integrity at 7%, the AI replied. "Power restoration. Possible, with available materials." Reed exhaled slowly, a mix of relief and disbelief washing over him. He had found it, the data core Harker had died to protect. But it wasn't just information. It was an AI, one built for command, survival and defense. He touched the console again, his voice low. "Can you fight?" The AI paused, its faint lights blinking faster. Systems offline, but reconstruction possible. It projected a map across the floor. A blue holographic grid showing hidden tunnels under the dunes, old weapon stores and power conduits buried in the desert. "Scans detect alien energy readings nearby," it added. Reed looked toward the map's flickering edge. "That's the Chief's camp," he muttered. They were regrouping, rebuilding, and they would come for him again soon. He stood, gripping the edge of the console. "Then we rebuild first," he said quietly. He dragged broken power cells from the corridors, cannibalizing parts from dead drones. Wiring them together with his last tools, sparks flew. Lighting the control room with ghostly flashes, bit by bit the crawler began to stir. Engines groaning under the dunes like a giant awakening from sleep. Dust fell from the ceiling as metal plates shuddered and reconnected. The ground above trembled. The desert felt it too. The AI's voice grew clearer. Reactivation sequence complete. Automated repair drones online. Remaining armaments, limited. Reed smiled faintly, exhausted but satisfied. He sat down on a metal crate and whispered, "You've been sleeping a long time, friend." "Directive. Protect human command," the AI replied softly. He nodded, eyes closing for a moment. "Then let's finish what we started." Outside, the dunes began to shift. Panels emerged from beneath the sand, satellite dishes, weapon pods, engines, and vents glowing faint blue. The ancient human machine breathed again for the first time in decades. A Terran warcrawler stood awake beneath alien skies. Its scanners swept across the horizon, detecting heat and motion. Far away, alien sentries saw the lights flicker in the desert and froze in disbelief. "What is that?" one whispered, but Reed was already moving. Adjusting controls, voice steady. "It's dinner time," he said quietly. "Let's remind them what humans built." The crawler's engines rumbled, shaking the dunes as the machine began to rise from its grave. And above the growing storm of sand, the AI's voice echoed once more. "Commander Reed, awaiting target confirmation." He smiled in the dim glow of the monitors. "Target Var Druck." And as the old war machine roared to life under the twin moons, Reed whispered the words that had become his vow. "I eat last." The next sunrise did not bring peace, it brought thunder, heat, and the sound of an ancient human war machine dragging itself out of its grave. From the dunes of Kashar, the buried crawler rose like a beast of metal and dust, shaking the sky with the roar of its engines. Sand poured from its hull in golden rivers, revealing cannons, armor plating, and the faded insignia of the Terran army. Inside, Corporal Reed sat in the control seat, covered in sweat and grime, lit by the flicker of dying screens. Every console he touched came alive under his hands, like the machine had been waiting for him. Power restored at 40%, the AI reported. Reed grinned, the corners of his mouth cracked and dry. That'll do, he muttered. He stared through the viewport at the horizon, where smoke marked the alien camp. Thousands of warriors regrouping, preparing to hunt him again. He could almost hear Vardrak's voice in the wind. Snarling orders, promising revenge. Reed leaned forward and whispered to the AI, "Then let's feed the desert." The crawler's treads ground against the sand, crushing dunes as it moved toward the rising suns. Drones buzzed around it, small metallic insects rebuilding armor and rearming turrets. Each turn of its massive gears made the desert tremble. The machine was not alive, but it remembered war, and it followed the scent of it like a predator. Inside, Reed loaded energy rounds into the cannon bay and checked the plasma vents. He felt the vibration through the floor, the pulse of something deep and powerful under the dunes. The sand eaters were awake again. Drawn by the sound, meanwhile, at the alien stronghold, Chief Vardrak stood on a ridge of black stone staring east in the far distance. He saw dust rising in waves, bright flashes beneath it. His second-in-command trembled beside him. "My chief, something's coming. It's human-made," Vardrak snarled, gripping his spear. "Then we crush it," he growled. "I want his skull before the suns fall." The alien army moved into formation, thousands of riders fanning out across the dunes. They raised banners of bone and cloth, their skimmers howling like beasts. When the first cannon blast came, it tore through the desert like thunder. The crawler's main gun fired, sending a beam of white heat that split the front ranks of the alien horde. The explosion painted the sky red, but the aliens didn't break, they surged forward, their plasma bolts striking the crawler's armor, melting metal. Inside, alarms screamed. Smoke filled the cockpit, but Reed didn't stop. "AI, target secondary ridge," he commanded. "Confirmed," the machine replied calmly. The crawler's rear batteries rotated and fired. Missiles streaked through the sandstorm, tearing open dunes and unleashing something beneath. The ground erupted, sand eaters, dozens of them rising in fury. Their bodies glistening under the twin suns, the alien soldiers froze, their war cries turning into screams as the creatures lunged. Swallowing entire squads, the desert had come alive. Every shot, every explosion woke more of them. Reed's plan was brutal and perfect. Turn the desert itself into a weapon. He guided the crawler between the dunes, firing short bursts, forcing the aliens to scatter and move. Each movement stirred the sand, calling the monsters closer. Vardrak shouted for retreat, but it was too late. A sand eater burst up beneath him, its jaws wide enough to swallow his skimmer whole. He leapt clear, rolling down the slope as his soldiers vanished in clouds of dust and blood. He looked up and saw Reed's machine emerging through the haze like a mountain made of fire. The chief's eyes widened, filled with rage and disbelief. "One human did this?" he roared inside the crawler. Reed's voice came calm through the comms. "No, Chief," he said. "The desert did." He triggered the crawler's final salvo. Missiles streaked upward, bursting in the sky and raining molten shards down like stars. The beast below roared and dove, dragging what was left of the alien army into the depths. The dunes churned like water in a storm, and for a few moments, it looked as if the entire planet was alive and feeding. By the time the sun set, the battlefield was quiet. The crawler's engines sputtered, coughing smoke, its hull glowing red from heat. Reed leaned back in his seat, exhausted. The AI's voice came through, faint but steady. Enemy presence none detected. Remaining power 12%, Reed smiled weakly, staring at the burning horizon. "Good," he whispered. "Then it's over." But even as he spoke, he could see shapes moving far away, sand eaters circling, restless and watching. The desert was calm again, but it was not kind. He looked out at the ruined alien camp. Nothing but fire and bones now, and beneath his breath, he said it once more, not as a boast, but as a truth earned by blood and dust. "I eat last." Above him, the stars began to shimmer through the heat haze. The desert wind carried no laughter this time, no mockery. No chief's voice. Only the slow hum of the crawler's dying engines, and the sound of the sands whispering around him, soft, almost respectful, as if even the planet itself had finally understood what it meant to be human. The desert was quiet again. After 3 days of fire, thunder, and screams, the sands of Kashar had gone still, too still. Ash drifted like snow across the dunes, coating the broken armor of the fallen. Where the alien army once stood proud, only silence remained, no banners, no songs, no mocking laughter, only the wind, whispering through the bones. Deep within the wrecked crawler, Reed sat slumped in the pilot's chair. The machine's lights flickered faintly, systems fading one by one. The air was thick with the smell of burned circuits and blood. His hands trembled from exhaustion, his uniform torn, his lips split and dry. Every breath came with pain, but he was alive. He had done what no army could. He had turned the desert itself into his ally. AI. Status, he rasped. The machine's voice came soft, slower than before. Power. 5%. All weapons offline. Internal damage critical. Reed looked around at the blinking consoles, remembering the roar of the battle, the way the sand eaters had devoured everything. Even the alien's pride. He leaned back, staring up at the cracked ceiling, and let out a faint, tired laugh. "You did good," he said quietly. The AI's tone glitched, flickering. "Directive. Protect human command. Completed." He didn't answer for a long while. Just listened to the faint hum of dying systems outside. The twin suns were setting, turning the dunes red like liquid fire. Through the cracked viewport, Reed saw movement. A dark shape crawling across the sand, dragging itself closer. He reached for his rifle, but it was empty. When the figure came into view, he saw the horns and shattered armor. Chief Vardrak, half buried, half alive. The alien's eyes burned with hatred and disbelief. "You should have died. Long ago," the chief hissed, spitting sand. "The desert takes all. Even kings. Even men." Reed pushed himself up, his legs shaking, and limped toward the open hatch. He stepped out into the cold night, the sky vast and heavy with stars. Each step left a bloody print on the sand. He stopped a few feet from the chief, staring down at him with the same calm that had once silenced an army. Vardrak's voice broke. "What are you, human?" Reed looked out at the desert stretching forever in all directions. The wind howled between them, carrying ghosts of old battles. He knelt beside the dying alien, his voice low but steady. "Humans don't pray," he said. "We finish." Vardrak tried to speak, but the words died in his throat. His last breath left as the sands shifted beneath him, pulling his body under. Reed watched until the desert swallowed the chief completely, leaving no trace, no grave, no mark, just silence. He stood there for a while, breathing slowly, the stars reflecting in his tired eyes. Behind him, the crawler gave one final shudder, its engines sighing like a sleeping beast. The AI's voice whispered faintly through the wind. "Goodbye, Commander Reed," and then silence. The last light went out, and the machine that had fought beside him became still forever. Half buried by the shifting sand, Reed turned his face to the horizon, where the first light of dawn touched the dunes again. His body ached, his vision blurred, but his steps were steady. He began walking east, back toward nothing. No orders, no soldiers, no home, just the endless red world. But every step he took left footprints that refused to fade. The wind tried to erase them, but the desert itself seemed to hesitate, as if it remembered him. Somewhere far beneath the dunes, something rumbled, one of the great beasts moving again. It didn't attack, didn't hunt. It only followed from a distance, as if escorting the last soldier who had earned the desert's respect. The human who had made it bleed. Reed paused once more. Looking back at the horizon where the crawler lay buried, he whispered softly, "Guess I'm the last one standing," the wind answered with a low hum, carrying his words across the sands like a promise. He smiled, weary but certain. Then turning toward the endless light, he muttered his final words into the dawn. "I don't pray," he said again, voice fading in the wind. "I eat last." And as he disappeared over the ridge, the desert stirred, not in hunger this time, but in quiet respect. The sands that had devoured armies shifted to cover his footprints gently, as if protecting the story of the man who refused to bow, the man who made even the desert listen.